Welcome to Cindy's Bookshelf, where I choose special books from my very own shelf to share with you and your family. The story that I'll be sharing is titled Frankie Makes a Friend by Tony Bradman and Sonia Holyman. "Mum," said Frankie one night, "I'm bored." "Really, Frankie?" said Mum. "You must learn to keep yourself more occupied. Your father and I are never bored, and that's because we stay busy. Isn't that so, dear?" "Did you say something, my little petal?" said Dad. "I do wish you'd turn that thing down," said Mum. "I'm sure it's damaging your ears." Frankie had to admit Mum was right about being busy. His parents were always doing something. For instance, Mum loved keeping herself fit by working in the garden. And Dad loved listening to very loud rock and roll on his personal stereo, especially when he was doing the ironing. Sometimes Frankie got tired just looking at them. "Why don't you play with some of your toys?" said Mum. "I've done that already," muttered Frankie. "Oh well," sighed Mum. "I suppose we'll just have to let you watch TV. While I think of something a little more useful for you to do. Is that all right with you, dear?" "About 11:30, my sugar plum," said Dad. Frankie turned on the TV and watched some cartoons, but they weren't very funny, and soon he was even more bored than ever. He hoped Mum would come up with something. She did. "I've made you a snack," she said, "and I thought of what you can do. Once you've eaten this, I'd like you to take Woofy for a walk. Some damp night air will be good for both of you." Frankie's heart sank. He loved their pet, but he didn't really feel like taking him for a walk. There was no getting out of it though, so he fetched Woofy's lead. "Do you think it will rain, Dad?" he said as they were leaving. "No thanks, Frankie," said Dad. "I've just had a cup of tea." "Whoa, Woofy," said Frankie, "not so fast." As usual, Woofy dragged Frankie through the dark forest and headed straight for his favourite place, the old graveyard. He just loved scrabbling for bones in the dark corners. "If only I had someone to play with," said Frankie, sitting on an old tombstone. He felt very gloomy. "Fat chance of that, though. It's dead boring living around here." "I think it's time we went home, Woofy," said Frankie at last. "The sun will be coming up soon." But on the way back, they got lost in the woods. At last, they came to the edge of the forest and saw a village. Frankie watched as two children ran down the road. He thought they both looked very strange, but interesting too. Mum was cross when they got home. She didn't like Frankie being out in daylight. Besides, it was well past his bedtime. Frankie started taking off his clothes. "And mind you go straight to sleep today," said Mum. "You need your rest. You'll be having a very exciting night tomorrow. Your father is taking you to visit the Baron." Frankie found out more at breakfast. It was time for Dad's annual checkup. Mum had told him to make sure the Baron gave him some new ears. His old ones were completely worn out. "Dad's also going to ask if the Baron can think of anything to keep you occupied, Frankie," said Mum. "So be a good boy." They set off at the stroke of midnight. The Baron's castle was at the top of a steep mountain. It took them ages to get there. Frankie waited while Dad went into the laboratory. There were lots of fascinating things to look at. At long last, Dad came out. He had new ears and a box that looked very interesting. "Ready, Frankie?" he said. "Oh, and the Baron gave me this. It's for you." When they got home, Frankie dashed straight up to his room and shut the door. He opened the box and couldn't wait to get started on what was inside. He was very excited. Soon everything was ready. Then a terrific thunderstorm began. Bolts of lightning flashed through the window. "Yippee!" shouted Frankie. "I've done it!" Frankie opened his bedroom door and called his parents. "Mum! Dad!" he said proudly as they came upstairs. "I'd like to introduce you to my new friend. I've just made him." "Eek!" screamed Mum. "I've never seen anything so disgustingly hideous in all my life. It's vile!" Dad was so shocked that some of his stitching burst. "Come on," said Frankie to his friend. "Let's go and play." "Quick," whispered Mum. "Save him from that monster." "Did you say something, my angel of delight?" muttered Dad. That's the end of the story. Click like and subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories from my shelf. You can find more stories from Tony Bradman or Sonia Hollyman online, in-store or at your local library.